Okay, it is 4:30. I'm calling the meeting to order and acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, Tla-o-qui-aht. A notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. Notice to virtual attendees, sign up for public comment question period using the Q&A function on Zoom. To register, participants are required to enter their full name, residential address, and the agenda item they wish to speak to. There are no objections. Consent. I'll move that pursuant to section 15 of the District of Tofino receives meeting procedure bylaw number 1229/2016 amended. The October 10, 2023 regular meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at Municipal Hall 380 Campbell Street in Tofino, BC. Seeing no objection, that motion is carried. Also, through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I move that October 10th, 2023 regular council agenda be adopted. Seeing no objections, that motion is carried. The consent agenda. The councillor, anything they want removed. Also, through unanimous consent, I move that items 4.1 to 4.3 of the consent agenda on the regular council meeting held October 10th, 2023 be approved and received. Seeing no objections, that motion is carried. Mr. Shortall, do we have any signed up for public comment?
No comments currently at this point, Mayor, but I'll do a call now for anyone in the viewing gallery or also online via Zoom. If they'd like to make a comment to council, they can do so by stating their name, their address, and the agenda item they are referring to. So calling 3 times, calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times, and no comments at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Shortall. Mayor's report. It's been a while since I've been here as chair of a meeting, so I want to take this time to commend the community, businesses, visitors, and especially district staff for successfully managing an unprecedented drought this summer. We saw 75% less precipitation than an average year in Tofino, and we managed to get by without declaring a state of local emergency. That is a remarkable feat. It took a lot of people, a lot of efforts, a lot of ingenuity, and a lot of hard work. And I very much appreciate everyone who bent their will to make that happen. And I'm proud of our community. Moving on to UBCM. UBCM 2023 was great. Several councillors, myself and staff, Satiana attended. I think UBCM is an excellent time to meet other elected officials, other staff members, ministry staff, and especially ministers, and to lobby both officially and unofficially for not only Tofino, but West Coast residents. It was a great time, and I look forward to later in the meeting hearing how councillors felt and what they came away with. We did have the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, and it was an honor to celebrate a little bit with the local elementary school, teachers, parents, and children, and staff. And later on, actually in business initiated by council members, we'll get to unveil a survivor's flag that was given to the district by SC70. So I look forward to that too. That is all from my mayor's report. Moving on to delegations, we have a delegation from Tla-o-qui-aht Sound, or Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere Trust, and the Tla-o-qui-aht Sound Biosphere Center. Annual report summary. Ms. Hurwitz, do we have Ms. Hurwitz?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Law. Can you all hear me?
Super, we've got you. You're on.
Awesome. And can I share my screen? I'm going to try this, and can you see that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for taking time today to hear about an update from the Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere Trust. My name is Rebecca Hurwitz. I'm the Executive Director of the CBT. I'm starting at the end. There we go. So a little bit about the Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere Trust. Our organization was formed in 2000 when the region was designated as a UNESCO Biosphere region. And our vision is that the communities of Tla-o-qui-aht Sound Biosphere region will live sustainably in a healthy ecosystem with a diversified economy and strong, vibrant, and united cultures. And we've been working at this for over 23 years and really appreciate having the appointments from all of the communities in the region to our board. So all 5 nations, as well as District of Tofino and Q&amp and the Alberni Tla-o-qui-aht Regional District make appointments. And we are grateful to the Tofino directors appointed. That's Mike Davis, who is really active as our treasurer on the board, as well as Nora Morrison, who sits as the alternate board member and has been really active in our education award process. Looking back at 2022, it feels like a long time ago, but it's the last sort of full year that we have to encapsulate our programs. And so I'll just share a couple of highlights and then use these as jumping off points for where we're at in 2023. So last year we focused a lot on granting. That's a big part of our role as the local community foundation. And we granted almost $400,000 to local organizations and networks and individuals. And so that's 127 projects and many of those neighborhood small grants, 5 education awards, and some of them community fund grants as well. So as the community foundation, we're home to 12 other endowment funds, and we manage those in specific areas of interest. So one of the newer ones last year was the Saltwater Classic. And so we supported that event with their grant making through our platform. We've also been focused on strengthening biodiversity conservation, and with the support from Environment and Climate Change Canada. Last year, we were able to support a number of large-scale stewardship and restoration projects throughout the region. And coming into this year, we're excited to be hosting a forum with focus on research and stewardship in a couple of weeks. So I hope you will join us then. We're also working to support food security in partnership with the Alberni Tla-o-qui-aht Regional District, and we're home to the Coastal Agriculture Roundtable, which meets twice a year. We work with the Coastal Family Resource Coalition, with CBT as sort of the back office for that. And last year they hosted the 10th Coming Together Forum, which is quite a milestone. West Coast Nest is our education tourism program, and we're really grateful for the support from the District of Tofino to be training local youth with the skills to get engaged in the tourism business or tourism economy, and education tourism specifically, giving them skills as interpretive guides. And this past year, we've been quite focused on vital signs over the summer. So we aim to publish a vital signs report every 2 years, but it's been a number of years due in part to COVID, and as well, we haven't had census data in a number of years. So we're excited to be releasing the 2023 vital signs report in a couple of weeks. And as soon as we know when that will be arriving at the office, we will extend an invitation to an open house. I heard, Dan, you mentioned, or Mayor Law, I heard you mention the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and we were really keen to work with Q&amp Secondary School again this year to co-host an exhibit at the school on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And we're just in the process of moving that exhibit up to the Tourism Tofino office, and we'll be opening that on Friday. So we invite you to join us that day to view a lot of the students' work. Many classes were involved in learning projects about reconciliation and residential schools. And so that work will be showcased, and it's really amazing, along with an exhibit from the Legacy of Hope Museum. So that's an overview of some of our projects that are currently underway. And I wanted to focus especially on the Biosphere Center today, a unique capital project right in the District of Tofino. So an overview of the Biosphere Center, many of you will be aware of sort of the scope and scale of the project from the rezoning process, but the Biosphere Center is really a hub for research, education, and training located in Tofino, but serving the entire Biosphere region. So it will be a public space that is available for education and training programs to connect people together with researchers, with organizations, and with these networks that we're a part of. A place for climate action, really bringing together, as I said, researchers, science, conservation organizations to do this work more collaboratively rather than so in such a distributed way. And a place for reconciliation and healing, a place to host exhibits, such as the one we're hosting at Tourism Tofino this week. We really find that there's not enough space, especially in Tofino, sort of central to the region, to do this vital work. And so it's with that in mind that the CBT board struck this vision many years ago, and we've been working away diligently to achieve the Biosphere Center. So key features of the building include a teaching kitchen, and we're really excited about the support from North Island College to bring culinary training programs to the region in this kitchen. And they've been really involved with the kitchen design, as have many local chefs and the community food initiatives, sort of key stakeholders like that. The building will also feature an education and training space, so a very large classroom that can be divided in two for smaller groups, or can host lectures and sort of be flexible in how the space is arranged. Community hub for co-working, so it will include office space for CBT, as well as a couple of additional desks and offices that will be available to other organizations and researchers and educators who would like to co-locate with us. There will be an elders room, which is an additional space for programming and nice and accessible right off of the front door entryway of the Biosphere Center, as well as exhibition space for research and really sharing the history of the region in terms of the biosphere designation and elevating our shared values around sustainable development and biodiversity conservation, so that visitors and newcomers to the region can come in and learn about the programs and events and research that are happening here, and really, share those values and elevate them. There's a couple other aspects of the building that are noted there, as well as some renderings from the architect. And as you'll remember, there's also 2 residential housing units that will be managed with the housing agreement with the District of Tofino that's already in place. Here's just the updated design. So you would have seen very similar images when we went through the rezoning process. There's been some slight changes to the interiors of the building, but really just based on community feedback and input that we've heard. So we're just showing here what I would call the first floor. So if you enter off of Campbell Street into that entryway, there's the exhibit space and the elders room, and then the co-working space behind that. And then on the top floor is the education and training space with the kitchen. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor or not, but the kitchen area is towards the back, and some room to flow and break out into some covered outdoor spaces as well for just sort of groups to move around and spill out. Just an update on the status and the timeline for the project. So we achieved the rezoning last year. It is a $15 million project, and we can say that with confidence because we've had our Class B cost estimate returned to us just in the beginning of July. As I noted, the property's been purchased. We've gone through rezoning. We've adopted what's called the Living Building Challenge. So this is a sustainable building framework, similar to the LEEDS program, but it's more comprehensive and holistic, which is why it really appealed to CBT. So it's very much about placemaking and includes aspects of equity and beauty and sort of that livability aspect of it. So we're working hard towards achieving that. We are seeking government funding. So the $15 million, we have applied to the Green and Inclusive Community Building Program for $7.2 million. And we're awaiting news of that grant. We applied in the spring, and from what we understand right now, no news is good news as they're going through the process. We've also been working hard on, for provincial support for the project. And earlier this spring, I presented to the budget committee, and they released their report in the summer and have recommended $5 million support for the project, which is really exciting. But that's just a recommendation at this stage. That's from the all-party group of MLAs that goes through that process. And so now we're working to sort of steward that through the 2024 budget process. And then we're also working on an application to the Rural Economic Development and Infrastructure Program. And so that's in part why I'm here today, is to update you on the project, but also to seek your support for our application to the REDIC program through a letter of support. And then as well, we're working on a capital campaign of total of $4 million to bring us up to that $15 million total. And at that, we're at $1.8 million. And I think that folks are really looking for those government grants to be in place before they make more significant contributions to bring us up to that total amount. But really, we've been having great positive conversations and really appreciated the chance to share the project with a number of donors over the summer. So yeah, just in summary, all of the design work is complete. We are essentially shovel ready. Our REDIC application is to focus on that very last stage before shovels would go into the ground, and that's called construction documentation. So basically taking all of the design work and turning it into blueprints and getting us ready to go to tender. We have also received the Mass Timber Demonstration Program grant, which is really exciting. And so that's a big aspect of the design, is the mass timber, and really, I think, resonates with the values and the feel and the history of the biosphere itself. So I'm very much open to any questions you might have about the project, and we'll just leave you with the request to consider a letter of support for our REDIC application.
Thank you, Ms. Hurwitz. Well, I will open it up to council. Questions, comments, Ms. Hurwitz?
It's great that they've made this much progress. That's good to see. Thanks.
Super. That's a lot of hard work, a lot of progress. So, all right. Well, I have a draft resolution in front of me. Oh, sorry, Councillor Steer, I see you there.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to a quick comment, and I had one question for Rebecca, and just wanted to reiterate the importance of the work that's being done, and I specifically think of those neighborhood grants have benefited my neighborhood, and it's been a catalyst for many active community participation subsequent over the years. So it's been a very valuable. And I did want to touch on also the USS Secondary Education Awards. They are an incredible award that has helped numerous students achieve post-secondary in a variety of fields that relate right back to our communities here. Once again, another incredible piece of work that's being done. And the most recent Truth and Reconciliation project up at USS, an extremely powerful piece of work. And I think you mentioned that it will be down at Tourism Tofino for everyone to see. If you haven't seen it, it's really well worth checking out. It's an incredible piece of work. And then once again, the vital signs, as you know, we're really looking forward to that. Once again, an important resource document for many community service NGOs. And of course, the District of Tofino utilizes it in almost every report, I think. So those are, you know, really important pieces of work that goes on. I had a quick question about the center itself, and just often one of the things that I encounter on some of the boards of the nonprofits that we sit on is an accessible meeting space. And I saw in the diagram of the interior space, there was a meeting room. Would there be for community nonprofits in our communities, would there be accessibility to that meeting space for those nonprofits?
Yeah, awesome question. Thank you for all of your positive feedback, Councillor Steer. Yeah, I would just add first about the Education Awards. We've just announced a new Education Award, which is the Lifelong Learner Award, and is for folks who have graduated and are continuing to pursue their education at different stages of life. So really interested to see the applications for that award. But back to accessibility for local organizations, absolutely, that is the intent and the vision, is to have the center be really activated by all of the local organizations that are in our region. And so we're looking at, in our business case, just that, how to make sure that the center is accessible to nonprofits and have different tiers of the fees for use. And some of those would be very low. So yeah, that's the goal for sure. Sorry, I cannot figure out how to stop sharing my screen right now.
You've done it. You've worked. You've stopped sharing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Oh, it's perfect. We have Tom. Now we're looking at Tom. I missed him before, but now it's just Tom. Great. Wonderful stuff. All right. No further comments for CBT? 2 thumbs up for CBT. Okay, I have a draft resolution. I'm going to read it out before I make a motion. That staff prepare a letter of support from the District of Tofino for the Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere Center and their application for the Rural Economic Diversification Infrastructure Program, REDIP. Does that sound good? Well, then I will move it. I'll move just that staff prepare a letter of support for the District of Tofino from the District of Tofino for the Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere Center and their application for the Rural Economic Diversification Infrastructure Program, REDIP. Second by Councillor Thomas. Any further comment? All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. We have correspondence. Manager Corporate Service from the District of Tla-o-qui-aht regarding a letter of support for the West Coast Community Resources Society BC housing application. We have no presentation for this, but if council's all read this, I think we can all probably agree this is a great thing. And the district, in my opinion, would be very happy to support. Seeing no objection, then I do have a draft resolution that staff prepare a letter of support for the District of Tla-o-qui-aht in partnership with the West Coast Community Resources Society in applying to BC Housing for a 2023 Community Housing Fund grant for the proposed development of 5 units of affordable and rental housing. Does that sound good to council? Yes.
Oh, I'm seconding.
Okay, well, I'll just say that I moved that then, so I don't have to say it again. Councillor Anderson seconded it. Any further comment for council? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Thank you. Great stuff. Lots of great stuff. Moving right on to presentations and reports. We have 10.1, a closure of a portion of Mackenzie Beach Road. And we do have a report from Mr. McCall.
Thank you, Council. Good evening. On behalf of the Director of Public Works and Infrastructure, I'm here tonight to present and introduce a bylaw for Council's consideration regarding the closure and disposal of a section of road on Mackenzie Beach Road. So a bit of background here, this bylaw is in accordance with the land transfer agreement and is a requirement in order to proceed with the Mackenzie Beach Road Improvement Project that includes a bus loop and public beach access. The transfer agreement itself is fairly simple. District of Tofino will receive the rights to 651.5 meters squared of an area in exchange for Mackenzie Beach Resort receiving the rights to 596.4 meters squared of an area. And this portion of this will be dedicated as a road, a portion will be dedicated as a road closure and disposal, and an easement for parking for Mackenzie Beach Resort to use in perpetuity. So this is how it looks. The red here indicates a section of road that is proposed to be closed. The blue here indicates the area in which the District of Tofino will gain for the purposes of improved public beach access and a bus loop. And the green indicates parking easement locations as mentioned. Bylaw notice. So there's a very prescriptive process that we are following in section 40 of the community charter to close the section of road. We provided notice to the community of this disposition of this land in 2 editions of the Westerly and received no public comment. And with that, I can offer this recommendation that District of Tofino Road Closure and Dedication Removal Bylaw number 1332/2023 be read a first, second, and third.
Thank you, Mr. McCall. Do we have any questions for clarity from Mr. McCall? Do we have any comments? All right, seeing none, would somebody like to read that recommendation?
I'll move that the District of Tofino Road Closure and Dedication Removal Bylaw number 1332/2023 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Second by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments from council? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Thank you very much. It's a great project. Moving on to 10.2, we have a permissive tax exemption bylaw amendment, and we have a verbal report from Ms. Bodner. Ms. Bodner, you're on the beach.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'd like to present to you the amendment to bylaw 1297.01 2023, the permissive tax exemption, where a property that is currently exempt has changed ownership. The new owners have confirmed that the property will be the same or similar use as the previous ownership. There is no financial impact with this ownership change. I am recommending that the property at Lot 1, Plan VIP 34040 DL 114, Tla-o-qui-aht Land District, previously owned by the Tofino Senior Citizens Housing Society, now owned by Tofino Housing Corporation, be amended in bylaw 1297.01 2023 and be read a first, second, and third time. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Super, thank you, Ms. Bodner. Open it up for council for questions for Ms. Bodner. Questions, comments from council? I just want to go ahead.
There's something we should do. It's when the Housing Corporation took it over, it was a project we felt we should do. If we want to keep seniors in this community, we've got not every senior is wealthy, and there is a waiting list against the Mount Fauna. So I think it's just something we should do.
Absolutely, I agree. I think it's wonderful that THC was able to take that over and improve the condition and keep it running as a seniors housing project. So with that, without further ado, would somebody like to read the recommendation?
I'll move it. I'll move that District of Tofino 2021 to 2024 tax exemption amendment bylaw number 1297.01 2023 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Seconder? Councillor Thomas. Any further comments from council? All in favor? None opposed, one just carried. Thank you. All right, for 10.03. We have an application for a liquor license to Tofino Resort and Marina. We do not have a presentation on this. What is, I'm sure council has read everything. So it is basically to, the question before us is, does council want to take on or with staff to take on gathering the views of residents, potential impacts by Tofino Resort and Marina's application to the Liquor Cannabis Regulation Branch to allow for in-room alcohol, or do we not? So that's the question before us. I'm opening it up to council for questions.
I would suppose we do not.
Okay, sure. So what we can do first is are there any questions for staff? And then I'm going to go around and we can get everybody's feedback, and we can do it probably pretty quickly. Councillor Steer, you got your hand up, and then we'll go to Councillor McMaster.
Right, I was just going to but the direction you just gave me for what I was about to do. So you're looking right now for questions specifically, or?
If there's any questions, if there's none, we can move right to comments.
Okay, I don't have a question. I do have a comment.
Okay, well, let's go to Ali for a question.
And given that this company previously operated in-room liquor sales service, were there ever any complaints by neighbors or complaints to bylaws specifically about this? I guess through the chair that
you could, I mean, that could be a question for staff if we have a staff member present.
Through the chair, staff is not aware of any complaints related to the mini bar service.
Okay.
Great. All right, well, let's move right into comments. Councillor Steer first, then we'll go to Councillor McMaster, and then we'll go around the table.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I am going to recommend that that staff initiate it's consistent what we've been done in the past. It's consistent with some of the work that we've been doing over the years in terms of gathering community feedback in these particular cases. And I will point out that in the strategic priorities, one of the areas that wasn't identified in the report is to initiate under community life we will initiate and support efforts to promote healthy living. And one of those is to look at all aspects of potential harms to the community. The other part of that is within the Local Government Act and within the Community Charter, it's very clear about the important role that councils have in these areas of comment and bringing forth. And I would also argue that within the consistent nature of this, that there is within that provision, it's a 60-meter area, and I would include a little further out because one of the residential neighborhoods that could be potentially impacted are right across the road. And I can't remember, it's Nielsen Credit. It's where Laura Lunty lives, up in that area right across from Tofino Resort Marina. So I think it is important that we're consistent in our approach and that we provide the feedback. It is not that much work on staff's time to do this. And I think it would be consistent and important for us to follow up with something that we've been doing for years now.
Great. Councillor McMaster.
Well, I would disagree entirely with that because we've not been consistent because the very last liquor thing we did look at, we decided to go with option 2. So consistency has not been prevalent. And the fact it used to have a minibar service, I think if anyone's stupid enough to use the minibar rather than walk into the liquor store, that's their issue. And yeah, I just think people that stop in hotels expect things like that. I don't have a problem. And with a 60-meter regulation isn't going to include any residences that I can think of. And you can't just arbitrarily, for the liquor board, you just can't arbitrarily increase the distance. So I would go with option 2, as I said.
All right.
If I, sorry, through the chair, Marilyn, I could just respond to Councillor McMaster because we have been consistent in that the last 2 applications, one that was at Hotel Z and before that, the Gas and Go, where we both commented, Council, I don't remember anyone where we haven't gone with option 2. We've always gone with option number 1. And within that framework, it's not a question of us pre-deciding whether they should or shouldn't. We're gathering the public information that is necessary to make informed decisions about what we should and should not have within the community. This is not a question of us saying a yes or no at this point. This is gathering community feedback on an important issue that's related to the community.
Okay, let's we'll keep
Yeah,
we'll avoid maybe we'll avoid a heated debate right now, but we can actually ask staff to clarify that for the record if the last one before us was actually consistent or not. Wouldn't mind seeing that, but we'll go around the table again. Councillor Thomas.
I'm happy with option 2 as I see this as a continuation of a service that they were offering. If they had previously not had a mini bar and this is going to be a new thing, then I would be more in favor of option 1, but as it's a continuation, I'm happy with option 2.
All right, I can go last. Councillor Sawyer.
I'd agree with Councillor Thomas, given the clarity from staff being that there had been no previous complaints or concerns from the public.
I'm happy with number 2.
I'm happy with number 2 as well. It's I think the minibar service is quite different than direct alcohol sales where you're inviting large numbers of the public to come in and purchase alcohol, or even in it's a restaurant or pub situation where, again, large numbers of the public are asked, being invited to come. This is one hotel guest or maybe whatever, having access to a service that is provided by hotels everywhere and has been provided by this hotel until the restaurant changed, basically. So it's just a continuation of the service And I don't see it in any way increasing access to alcohol beyond what is already in place.
Okay, I'm gonna anchor this. I'm gonna have to agree with Councillor Steer that alcohol access in Tofino has increased through the pandemic, through provincial legislation allowing off sales at many restaurants, which have does increase access, and we know that it's not a correlation. I know that it is causation. Increased access increases use, which increases harms, and we can know from the RCMP, from our own medical health officer and our hospital, that alcohol is the #1 cause, and this does increase alcohol use. I have to say that I have not been in a hotel in the last few years that has had alcohol in a bar. Most hotels have removed. And I would also have to say that a mini bar is much different than a staffed bar or a restaurant or a liquor retail, where there is somebody there to ID people and to assess the people that are buying alcohol. Mini bars in a room are unsupervised. There really is no way in my mind, of protecting minors, or people that may not be suitable for drinking alcohol all the time as they are in a bar, or a hotel, or in a restaurant. So I actually think that this is a trend that is being decreased by and large. And so I would say that as alcohol access has increased in Tofino and other areas, then I would say personally that this should be decreased. And anyway, I would also say too that the complaints against previous owners of the TRM property have decreased dramatically with over the years, and it had directly to do with alcohol use at night. So that's something I know personally. So that's it. So we have that's my thing. So what I'm going to do is, I think Councillor Steer and I are in the minority, but I'm going to just look to council for that. Is anybody going to change their mind?
I think the majority of higher end hotels do offer this service, and if they don't have a full mini bar, often there'll be bottles of wine, or it's an amenity you can add on when you book your hotel room. I think most hotel rooms are booked by adults. They know who's staying in the rooms, maybe not all the time, but I think having something that's there and taking away an amenity from a hotel is definitely a detriment to them. I don't think the mini bar program is the same as somebody at a bar. I know that sometimes you might have that regulation of somebody serving them, but not everybody's great at judging that with people. So oftentimes you'll serve somebody a double, maybe not in my environment, but serve somebody a double, or allow them to order beers or take a bottle of wine away. Whereas the mini bar is like small portion stuff, and that the dollar amount attached to it is often a deterrent.
All right. Go ahead.
I would just also bring this back to the topic that we are not deciding whether or not they should offer the service, but whether or not the community will be consulted, and whether or not our staff are going to put their time towards that. So I'm not voting whether or not I think they should have that service. I'm voting whether or not I think the staff should be putting their resources towards the community engagement. And so that was why my comment was directly towards whether or not there had been complaints related to that service in the past. And that is why I'm making this point.
I find it difficult to determine whether a complaint was related to the minibar service or actual just the bar which is serving alcohol.
I just feel that staff have so much on their plates that if this is a non-issue,
I'm prepared to move option 2 to get on with it.
Go ahead, one last.
Well, I was under the impression that even if we did go with option 1, that it was only relevant to residents within 60 meters of the subject property, which I don't I think there's only one house.
I think if they're, just to be clear, the RCMP are also able to put in their 2 bits as well as other organizations if you read the actual report, if I'm not mistaken. And it does allow council to debate this and give a recommendation. So I think that's what we're looking at here. I just wanted to point out that I'm against this, and you know, if the majority of council aren't or for it, then that's fine. But we are talking about allowing people to, or the district to gather comments from the community. Councillor Steer, one last comment.
Yeah, and I just wanted to reiterate, and for Councillor Sloman's information, it is prescribed for that 60-meter radius that you have to go out to, but the community can all the community can put input into those applications. They're just not notified of it. So that 60-meter radius is only by that is the guideline that is given, that they have to, that radius area is where they have to put out those submissions. But the whole community, as Mayor Law pointed out, RCMP will be involved, council will be involved. And once again, this is a question about not so much whether we agree or disagree around the use of alcohol within the communities. To a certain degree it does, but in this particular application, once again, the question is, were there complaints around it? And I don't think that should be the criteria for whether we should be looking at these applications in general. As one of the, as we know and has been pointed out, as one of the major number one public health issue in our community and in our region, it is in our responsibility, I believe, to at least have community input, which may include our medical health officer, may include the RCMP, who may have relevant information to council to be able to make an informed decision to the Liquor Control and Regulation Branch as to the validity of this application. That's what we're looking at here, not so much of us making that decision at this point in time. I think it's important for us to be able to have that conversation and to be able to bring that forward. And in terms of the amount of staff time that's involved, this is a limited amount of staff time that is involved. It's a matter of putting out, as we've noted, very few, and it may not be that many, but the ability to have that process go through, I think, is important. Staff time is not going to be a critical factor in this particular case.
Even if you go with option 2, the RCMP and the health board still has the right to offer input.
Okay, well, I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm not going to abuse my position as chair. So since we have a majority that I believe still want to go with option 2.
I'll move that the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch be advised that the District of Tofino Council does not wish to provide comments to the branch respecting the application submitted by Tofino Resort and Marina to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch for a liquor license to allow for in-room minibar program as set out in the LRCB application signed January 2023.
All in favor?
Second first.
Oh, second, sorry, second was not Councillor Thomas. Any further comments? All in favor? Just record who's in favor there. We have Councillor McMaster, Councillor Thomas, and Councillor Sword. Carry on around the corner, and then all opposed. Councillor Steer and myself are opposed. That motion is carried. All right, let's go on to 10.4. We have a volunteer in composite fire department training and equipment funding. Oh, sorry, volunteer and composite fire department training and equipment funding. We have a report from community services. We do not have a presentation.
No presentation, but Chief Coombs is here in the audience if there are any questions.
Oh yeah, there you are. Super. I just want to say thank you for all the hard work you do. You did an excellent job, and it's a pleasure to make this recommendation. I just want to say that. Just highly value our local fire department. You guys do an excellent job, and the community is well served. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Council, comments, questions? Seeing none, would somebody like to read this recommendation?
I move that staff be authorised to prepare an application to the Community Emergency Preparedness Funding Programme in the amount of $30,000 in support of the purchase of necessary replacements of tools and equipment for structural firefighting purposes for the Tofino Volunteer Fire Department through the Volunteer and Composite Fire Department Training and Equipment stream.
Seconded by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments from council? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, 10.5, we have a zoning amendment bylaw 1315. This is for 825 Campbell Street. You have a PowerPoint from Mr. Nick.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's been a moment since I've presented to you in person, so nice to see everybody here. I'm going to be speaking very briefly about the zoning amendment bylaw 1315. This is for 825 Campbell Street, commonly known as the Woodsmere property. A little while ago, we held a public hearing in association with this zoning amendment, and this particular report recommends third reading as well as recommends the adoption of the public hearing record. A brief background, kind of a little bit, we've been in process since about November of 2019. A lot of the work on this particular file was done by Mr. Aaron Rogers, who was at the time the manager of community sustainability. There's been a few changes to the bylaw. The bylaw initially came forward as bylaw 1304 and was granted first and second reading in January of 2021. There's then some significant changes brought forward based on staff recommendations, some council feedback as well, and it was deemed necessary to just draft a completely new bylaw, which was then granted first and second reading in April of 2022. Since that time, we held a public hearing in June, and we also received some additional information regarding traffic impacts and what is necessary to accommodate a potential future deceleration lane as well as a left-hand turning lane. As the rest of the property is built out, those turning lanes are not deemed necessary by either MOTI or the applicant's traffic consultants at this point in time. However, as the property and overall development is potentially built out over the next 5, 10, or even further years, it may accommodate many more residents, and at that point in time, it will become necessary to have left-hand turning lanes, deceleration lanes, etc., to access the proposed access road. So it's important to note right now, we're actually not introducing any changes to the previous bylaw that was granted 2 readings. Mostly, I would like to talk a little bit about the public hearing and then about the next steps as we move towards potential adoption. So a brief summary of the public hearing. I believe this is attached as one of the appendices to the report. It was held in June of 2023. There were 7 written submissions received, 5 were clearly in support, 2 were opposed. There was 10 oral representations held that took place at the actual public hearing. In general, they were very supportive. There were a few concerns brought forward by members of the public. These included things like drainage, that was mentioned numerous times, overall water supply and capacity, so some engineering concerns, as well as traffic and parking, the nuisance of ongoing construction and potential road closures in that area. There was some concern or some, I'm not sure if there was concern or maybe confusion about the removal of short-term rentals for these particular properties. And then also some mentions of buffering, particularly as the property is adjacent to the existing trailer park, as well as adjacent to the highway or Campbell Street as it comes into town. So one of the things that I kind of want to touch on, this was something that Mr. Rogers during the last presentation of this particular bylaw amendment spoke at length about is the development agreement. This is one of the parts of this entire bylaw or development process that is pretty key at this point. Really, this development agreement is kind of outlining what the district needs to see prior to being willing to consider adoption. Because this particular development includes also a subdivision as well as a development permit as well as a building permit, there's a variety of different kind of stops that the district has along the way. However, this particular development agreement is intended to very clearly outline what the district is expecting through this particular development project. So one of the things that or a number of things are kind of outlined on this slide. Many of these have been largely addressed or at least partially addressed and need to mostly just be formalized into a particular covenant. I'll just kind of go through the bullet points one at a time. The park location has been discussed at length with the applicants. And so we do have a location that seems suitable. It'll be approximately 1.25 acres. That would be the kind of 5% of the overall parcel. For this particular subdivision, only a smaller part of the parcel will be required, or a small part of parkland dedication will be required through the subdivision process. However, we're looking to ensure that as the rest of the property develops, that parkland will simply be added to rather than having kind of random small parks or random small parcels, not even necessarily parks, kind of scattered amongst the development wherever the developer chooses, as well as servicing and access to the park. Eventually that park will be serviced and accessible. However, the current location, while it's a great location for the overall build out of the property, is not easily accessible from the proposed 24 single family lots or the proposed 55 unit rental apartment. So ensuring that there's adequate access and service to that park. It's worth noting that at this point in time, that park will be largely what we describe as unimproved. So it'll just be a chunk of land provided in its current state. Potential for improvements may come as discussions continue for further development of the property. Again, siting of houses, driveway locations, neighborhood design. This was something that Mr. Rogers has worked quite a bit on and mentioned in his previous presentation. That's been quite well outlined at this point, but will just need to be codified into the agreement. The transit amenity has been identified as going to be a bus pull-off just to the south of the entrance to the property, kind of adjacent to the gas and go there. And through this agreement, it will be, we'll outline exactly where that is and how the transfer is meant to take place. Dedication of land was deemed to not be necessary at this point. I noted earlier that MOTI and Watt Consulting, which is the applicant's traffic engineers, reviewed the width of the right of way in this particular area and determined that very little, if any of the land will need to be dedicated. The current right of way that exists that's controlled by MOTI is large enough to accommodate any sort of turning lane or deceleration lane that may be necessary for future development on the property. And definition protection of green space areas not designated for development. Again, these have been outlined on the property. These are buffering areas and other areas that may not be developed due to grades or other environmental aspects. However, we would again formalize this through the covenant. Water and sanitary sewer. This is something that has come up throughout this entire process as well as at the public hearing. Currently, with our current understanding, we are fairly comfortable recommending moving forward with this particular phase. However, future phases of development on the property may require significant upgrades to infrastructure, and these may be at the cost of the developer. At this point, we're happy to move forward with the current forecasts. However, through this development agreement, we will be looking to secure our ability to essentially say no to the development if at the time of subdivision, or if at the time of development permit, or if at the time of building permit, it's deemed by the District of Tofino Engineering Services that we actually do not have the water or sewer facilities to accommodate the proposed development. Obviously, this is something that's kind of front of mind based on the last couple of months, but that is something that we already have access to as a district, but this will be make it a little bit more blatant and easy to understand for all parties involved. Storm drainage, this is something that we tend to get into a little bit more of a more detailed extent during the subdivision process. The goal here, this is an MOTI requirement as well as a District of Tofino requirement, is to ensure that pre-development flows match post-development flows. So what that means is any water runoff that's being created by the development needs to be managed by the development. In fact, we know that there are some drainage issues already along that area of the road, so we will be looking for the developer to essentially ensure that we don't have any flooding along those, particularly during heavy rain events along those ditches, and we may require significant infrastructure upgrades along the frontage of their property there to ensure that the concerns of both council and the community are met. The last bullet point there is the Ayler Street Road right of way. So this is actually not something that the district is directly involved with. However, to access the proposed 55 unit rental apartment building that's been discussed, the access point would be from Ayler's Road. That's the road that runs adjacent to the Q&amp gas station. That road actually terminates and runs into the adjacent property. So to actually access what they're trying to do, they will need a right of way or some sort of easement granted to them by the owner of the other adjacent property so that they can adequately access that particular location. Eventually, they would like to have a road that runs from Ayler's and loops around all the way and comes out to the proposed road, which is kind of the main access to the property in between the residential properties along Camel Street and Gas and Go and the entrance to the trailer park. However, due to the high cost of installing infrastructure and installing a road, they would like to initially have access to the 55 unit apartment building off of Ayler's Road. So that's something that we will be looking for prior to considering adoption of this bylaw, is that we, the district is able to review the third-party agreement or the private agreement between those two landowners to ensure that that act is in place. So this is quite an extensive list. It's a lot of it has been kind of well thought through and well developed by mostly conversations with Mr. Rogers and the applicants that happened previously. However, I just want to note, often when we come back for adoption of a particular bylaw, there's no presentation. Most of the things have been dealt with at that point. However, because this is a fairly involved development agreement, staff are recommending that we come back and just do a very brief presentation to council again to ensure that all of council's concerns are met, as this is one of the core parts of this particular zoning application at this point. So some of the next steps would be to finalize the development agreement and then look to fourth reading and adoption. As I noted, staff would then come back rather than just saying it's ready to go, but we would probably take the time to walk council through the development agreement just to ensure that we're all moving forward together and there's no surprises further down the line. So the options here, after bullet point 1, that's actually incorrect. It says grant permission to proceed with further review of the application. That should say accept the summary of representations held at the public hearing and maintain them as a public record, and also grant third reading to the zoning amendment bylaw number 1315. So the actual text after the number 1 is incorrect, but the recommendation below is correct. The other options would be that the zoning amendment bylaw be considered and denied, or that it be deferred until any concerns that council might have today are adequately addressed if council is not comfortable, moving forward with their reading today. Thanks. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to.
Super. Thank you very much. I normally go as council first, but I'm going to make a comment on this. Then I'm going to open up to council for questions of clarity. Just a couple questions here. And I'm going to start this off by noting that the last permission for granting of second reading and moving to the public hearing, staff, Mr. Rogers made some very, very strong comments that this would not come back to council unless the development agreement, the items on the development agreement were addressed. And it sounds like to me that the development agreement is not actually in place. So what I'm wondering, and this has seemed to be happening with this application sort of continually, that either council or staff have concerns and it comes back and some of those concerns or many of those concerns or all of those concerns haven't been met. And so I'm going to open that up. Where is the development agreement at right now with these specific items? Has it just been talked about, or is there an actual development agreement that addresses specifically these issues in writing?
Thank you for the question. There is no development agreement in existence right now. These have just been discussed.
Okay. Okay. All right, I'm going to open it up for council for questions. Councillor Steer.
Mayor Law, and this may be a reflection of what you just asked, but in the report, following third reading, staff will work with the applicant to finalize the development agreement. There was 11 items raised, and we talked about in detail there. And then it further goes in the report that the development agreement will be codified into a covenant and required to be placed on title. My question to staff is, if there is a breach or a non-compliance with that development agreement, what are the ramifications to the developer?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Steer, through the chair. The ramifications typically are outlined in that particular covenant. So there's sort of two approaches. Often legal agreements such as covenants actually contain particular sections or particular clauses that outline the consequences of a breach of that agreement. The other option, if that's not clearly defined, would be to seek an injunction through the courts to either stop the applicant from doing something they're doing or oblige the applicant to do something that they're not doing. So those are kind of the two routes to take. These covenants are legal agreements that are permitted through provincial legislation. And so they have significant authority and power in the court. So for example, if the applicant decided to not follow through with something that we had requested and outlined in the development agreement, we would essentially look to them to either we would kind of address that and ask them to stop the development. If they were unwilling to stop the development for whatever reason, we would look to the provincial courts to grant us an injunction. And at that point, there's significant additional powers that you can draw on to oblige people to stop what they're doing. And that would of course be dealt with. That bridge would be crossed when we came to it. But that's essentially the way that these legal agreements work. Either maybe it's not necessarily an either or thing, but often there's a clause that outlines exactly what the penalty is for breach of the particular contract or covenant, I should say. And outside of that, you seek relief in the courts.
Thank you.
Other questions for clarity? Councillor McMaster.
Yeah, I think I know the answer to this, but assuming this development goes ahead and the district has got involved with recommendations, because I know drainage is a big issue for people that live down below. Now, if those measures are not adequate when there's a big storm or something like that, who's liable? We've worked with the developer to come up with a recommendation. Who's liable? Secondly, if the people down below are sort of flooded out, is it left for them to go and go after the developer, or is the district going to step forward and help them out?
Thanks for the question, Councillor McMaster. Again, through the chair, it's not an answer you're going to like to hear, but the answer is who's liable is whoever the courts decide who's liable. So it very much depends on the situation. Typically, if there's an ability to prove that the development is the cause of this particular damage to the property or these particular flows that cause this damage, then the developer would be liable. But outside of that, I don't actually have a great answer for you, and it may be something that I have to follow up with our legal counsel to ensure that we understand. But the idea here is that we're trusting the engineers. And I know that is, again, a pretty tough pill for council to swallow. But we're trusting that the engineers are able to develop stormwater management systems that are adequate to accommodate 100-year storm event or whatever it is that is in this particular situation is outlined in our subdivision and development control bylaw. However, if you'd like more information, I'm more than happy to follow up with our legal counsel to kind of understand exactly what the implications are, or if there are any hard and fast rules that can be shared.
I would, because often the homeowner has enough financial difficulty correcting flood, and if he's faced with legal trying to take someone else to court, those people don't have the resources. That's my comment.
A couple of questions. We'll go ahead.
I'm still a bit confused about the park and when we'll know exactly where the park is.
Sure, yeah, thank you for the question through the chair. So parkland dedication is a requirement of subdivision. Whenever you're moving through a subdivision process that creates 3 or more new lots, as this applicant is, it's not part of the rezoning necessarily, but it's part of the subdivision process that will come after the rezoning. You're obliged to provide to the municipality as parkland 5% of the overall parcel that's being subdivided. So in this point in time, the rezoning only applies to a certain area of this particular rezoning only applies to a certain area of the overall parcel. And so their 5% dedication at this point, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I believe it's about 1/4 of an acre or so. However, throughout the development of the entire property, as they subdivide, they will be obliged to grant to the district as parkland about 1.25 acres, I believe. And rather than having that kind of in random pockets in areas that may not be desirable throughout the development at the discretion of the developer, the district has kind of requested that it all be provided in one location to provide a large central park for the neighborhood in an area that is adequate for us. Many times you'll find that parkland dedication is in areas that is just kind of not helpful to anybody. Maybe it's the side of a cliff or something like that. And so This particular area will be provided sort of in a central area of the property, which will be hopefully quite easily accessible to all of the current and future, or I should say all future residents of that particular area. And this element of the development agreement is just to ensure that that's understood by everybody. And when it comes to future phases of this particular development, the developer doesn't try to say, well, actually, I'm going to provide parkland over here, or actually, I'd like to do this instead, or I'd like to offer cash and do. It's to ensure that we have the parkland where we want it in the configuration we want it. So it is something that has been selected and worked through largely by Mr. Rogers again through his work, but it's something that will be, I suppose, formalized through the development agreement.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, my question, I've got a couple. I'll put out there my concerns and why I have these questions are around the servicing, mainly roads and storm drainage. And I think that in the future, Ellers Road will be more of a main access. And I don't think the current road location that will lead into the subdivision, it's a little problematic for me. So I'm wondering if there's going to be a traffic study on that for servicing both the apartment building and all the lots. We've had something that determined we don't need a left turn lane, but I'm just wondering, without the adjacent property owner developing, it's really hard to know how long that road is going to be, like kind of the main access, and not Ellers Road, where it probably should more likely be. So it's a difficult question to ask because it's sort of anticipating other and adjacent developments, but to what extent do we know about the roads and storm drainage? At this point, is it going to just be about servicing this sort of initial part of that whole parcel, including adjacent properties, or is it going to address that whole larger property? Do you get my question? I'm just wondering, will the servicing assessments now just be about this one piece, or will it take into consideration the bigger piece? Are we going to be putting in infrastructure such as storm drainage that when further development happens won't be able to handle other impacts of future development? How is that being addressed?
Thank you for the question through the chair. I'll try to answer. There seems like there's maybe a couple questions here, but my understanding is if the entire project is built out in the way that the developer is kind of proposing, there'll be two main accesses to it. One will be Ehlers as you're proposing, as well as the other access will be the new road that's being proposed adjacent to the gassing bill. That new road that's being proposed was designed in conjunction between our engineering services and their traffic engineering consultants. It's about a 20-meter wide right of way, so it's a fairly wide road, and it's intended to have parking on either side as well as sidewalks on either side. So it is actually a fairly comfortably wide road that is actually going to be probably at least large, if not larger than Ehlers. So it will be capable of accommodating traffic, kind of through to the further parts of the property as the land continues to develop. Again, that MOTI right of way that runs in front of there is actually adequate room, I guess, on the west side of the road to fit in a future left-hand turning lane and a right-hand deceleration lane as well. Those are not necessary for the initial 24 lot subdivision, but they will be necessary for any future phases of the development. So at this point, we've been checking to make sure that they won't be put in at this point in time, but in a future phase of the development, we will oblige the developer to work with MOTI to put those in, as they will become at that point. They'll kind of cross the threshold of needing that. As far as Ehlers Road goes, again, at this point in time, with the one apartment building, the traffic impact assessment that we have recommended that no further improvements be made. However, moving to future phases of the development, it may be necessary also to upgrade that infrastructure. The adjacent property, there's been a lot of conversations over the past few years about significant development on it as well. And in a far future scenario, maybe that Ehlers Road kind of goes up the side of that hill and connects either over to 4th Street or to Lone Cone at some point in the distant future to provide an alternate access into town, as well as an alternate access to those residential areas. However, at that point in time, there will likely be significant road upgrades to accommodate any traffic concerns at that point in time. The only other thing that I would say is that for this particular part of the development, we are fairly comfortable with the traffic impact assessment. However, for any future phases, we will require additional traffic impact assessments, which may recommend infrastructure upgrades. At this point, though, we have done what we can to ensure that those upgrades will actually have the room to be installed. So that's the traffic portion of the question. The other portion of the question would be the infrastructure portion of the question, which we would be looking at the overall kind of proposed development and trying to design stormwater drainage management to accommodate all of that. And it may be that future infrastructure, it will certainly be that future infrastructure is needed at other points and potentially alternative drainage patterns. However, at this point in time, it's very clear that the main drainage, at least from the 24 unit subdivision, single family lot subdivision, will be moving down towards the MOTO right away. And so there's some significant drainage improvements that will need to be made to accommodate for that. Future development, though, may not drain, or future aspects of the development may not drain down to that area, may drain to low-lying areas of the property instead. And there's, I would say, various other engineering interventions that can be implemented at that point to ensure that stormwater flows are not damaging adjacent properties or the property itself. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but if you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to try to specific.
It gets that in significant way.
Question? I have a question.
I actually have two questions now. I'm sorry. My first question is in regards to the size of the units. I was wondering if there was any movement of them possibly having 3-bedroom units, or if they're still set on only 1 and 2. I know that previously it came up that we only had needs apparently for 1 and 2 bedrooms, but I know I specifically live in a building that maxes out at 2 bedrooms, and there's lots of growing families that are looking for additional room. And I know a lot of people kind of have their eye on this as a single family home that they might be able to move into in an area with, bedrooms for each child, and if they're still set on the 1 and 2 bedrooms.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Thomas. My understanding is that their preference is to build largely 1 and 2 bedroom units. There was discussion of putting a couple 3-bedroom units in as well. However, that's typically not something that we like. The actual mix of unit sizes within a particular development is not something that we typically drill down into that much detail. If that's something that council is very firm on, that's something I'm more than happy to bring back to the applicant and say, hey, we might need to incorporate this as part of a development and future development agreement as well. However, we tend to, as a district, and this may be a correct approach or an incorrect approach, but we tend to allow a developer to build a certain number of units within an apartment building, and then they decide what's most feasible for them to build in terms of the mixed units from 1-bedroom studio, 2-bedroom, etc. And so we typically don't oblige developer to build certain sizes, but if that's something that council is very firm on, that's something I'm more than happy to continue discussions with them.
Can I make a comment on that before you go on? Is that all right? Just to make a comment on that? I just want to make a comment on that, is that in the previous presentations, it's been clear that this developer should be on the hook for 7 units of affordable housing plus DCCs or whatever, and they have refused to do that. So I think in this case, if council would like to see 3-bedroom units, which I think make a lot of sense, I think that should be taken into account, that whether or not we usually do it, this developer has refused to address the affordability option. So I think that's something we can certainly push. Just a comment. That's my opinion.
So my second question is nothing to do with the housing aspect of this. It has to do with the retail, commercial, and the convenience store. I'm just questioning why there's a convenience store in there if there's already the gas station. That's kind of walkable distance. To me, a convenience store is like cigarettes and lottery tickets, and it seems like a strange thing to be putting in a residential area that we're looking for families. And then for the retail commercial, I get the home occupations because we want people to be able to do things out of their house. But I'm wondering what the retail commercial aspect is in a residential area.
Thank you for the question through the chair. The retail commercial aspect was something that the applicant was uninterested in, but something that staff wanted to include in the bylaw for the opportunity to potentially have commercial activity there. The rationale behind that was creating a neighborhood that potentially will hold up to 1,000 people that is purely just residential, obliges people to drive their cars maybe more than they need to. Yes, the gas stations are in walking distance. However, having another small commercial location within that neighborhood will allow people to buy necessities such as milk and eggs and cheese and those kinds of things. Again, it's not necessarily a convenience store in the sense that, oh, it's a place to buy cigarettes and lottery tickets. It's a commercial location or the opportunity to provide a commercial location that can then be utilized to sell almost anything, but ideally something that would be of service to the neighborhood that it's serving. The idea here was kind of and maybe this is far-reaching on the part of staff, but to have some sort of an opportunity for a corner store if one should be viable or if one should want to exist there, that would allow the residents there to buy some staples without having to get in their cars and drive to town or get off the bikes or whatever it is. So again, to try to create these ideas of a complete community, which has not only just housing, but also has recreational opportunities in the form of a park. It also has commercial opportunities in the form of, small stores or potentially has daycare opportunities, all these kinds of things. So creating kind of these deserts of single use neighborhoods is something that hasn't necessarily created healthy communities in the past. I think a lot of subdivisions that we see in the 80s that are basically, if you want to do anything, you have to get in your car and drive, as opposed to the neighborhoods that, were maybe created more in the post-war era or even before that, where there was a little bit more mixed use just kind of inherently built into those neighborhoods as a result of them developing organically, and not without so much oversight. The only other thing I would notice that the applicant is essentially uninterested in developing that. And so that would be on potentially a future resident of the neighborhood to kind of take that on if they were looking to open a commercial space. But the developer has been quite clear that that's not part of their development business model and not something they have much familiarity with. So they're not interested in creating commercial space for lease at this point in time. Staff just wanted to create that opportunity in there so that the land had the ability to flex over time with the particular demands of the neighborhood.
As a quick follow-up, I don't see daycare as one of the listed uses permitted. Does that fall under one of the other umbrellas here?
That's correct. There's a general permission in Part 4 of the zoning bylaw for daycare facilities.
So this needs to be explicit.
Yeah, so they can be essentially operated as home occupation or elsewhere.
I have a question. I've already, there was two parts in the previous granting of first and second reading that would come back to council at third reading. One was the development agreement, which I understand does not exist. The other one was a servicing report, and I think it encompasses stormwater, water, storm drainage, not only that would forecast the demand for water for phase one, but also the build out for future developments. What is the status of that service report?
Thank you for the question. The servicing report was the one that was provided to council and staff, I believe, at second reading. I'm not sure of any additional one that's been required by staff at this time.
So that I'm just actually reading from the discussion at first and second that there was a servicing report for future forecasted water demand for phase one, future development impacts and current system goes with sanitary sewer and storm drainage. That I understand there was not a report. A servicing report. I'm just
at that time. Thank you for the question.
So this was supposed to come for council to actually address water usage. I have not seen a report that would address the water usage for this.
So my understanding is that report has been received and has been reviewed by our engineering services. I'm not sure why it was not included as part of this council package, but I'm more than happy to bring it back to council for their information.
Okay. A question, go ahead.
I had a question for clarity, I guess, from the previous first and second reading. There was discussion about the community amenity contribution of that the developer had restricted the idea of the 7 price restricted units, but that they were going to pursue CMHC funding, which would include 8 units or tenure, but that they also were not agreeing to guarantee that. I was just wondering if we knew whether or not they received that funding.
So they have not received, thank you for the question, to the chair. They have not received that funding. That usually comes essentially to qualify for that funding. You effectively need to have a rezoned piece of land and a plan in place, fairly, like Class C, Class B level drawings in order to actually apply for those. So I guess to try to answer the question in a bit more of a wholesome fashion, or fulsome fashion, maybe not wholesome, is maybe not the right word, but basically where the applicant is a private developer. And so they're looking for opportunities to fund their development in a way that makes financial sense to them. So the CMHC program is something that does make financial sense to them at this particular point in time. They've done this numerous other times. Whether or not that program A will be available and B will be something that they qualify for is not something that we're aware of until they actually reach the stage of building permit, which is likely to not be for another year, a couple of years, I would say at least. So this is something that they've said that they're interested in pursuing. However, in terms of any guarantees to the District of Tofino, there are none that they will actually receive that funding, or that funding will look what it has looked like in the past.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had similar concerns to yours as to the lack of guarantee of any price restricted units. And yeah, I guess it was just basic confusion on some parts where at first and second reading, it sounded like a lot of these concerns were going to be addressed in a development agreement that doesn't exist now. And so, yeah.
I make one comment just about that. So in the summary, in the second, first and second report, it does outline that the development agreement will be formed after third reading. So that's kind of the language that was used in Mr. Rogers' report at that point in time. Typically, these development agreements are kind of formulated after third reading. These are things like covenants, stat right-of-ways, any other legal agreements that are associated with a particular rezoning, because most of the time they're fairly technical and dry. And they just do one specific thing that council has requested. So that's why usually these are left to staff to kind of develop and negotiate. As this is a fairly large one, that was why staff kind of recommended that we come back at fourth reading and walk through it with council. But if that's something that council is uncomfortable with, I would say that there's not much point in us moving very far forward today, and that it may be that staff just don't really have it exactly at the point where council is comfortable to move forward with third reading. And we can defer and work with the applicant to actually develop the agreement. I would note that again, that's an uncommon practice. Typically, applicants are hesitant to spend significant money and make particular promises and codify that in agreement and sign it, especially before they have at least some assurance that they will be reaching the adoption stage. But if that's something that council is looking for at this point in time to ensure that all the concerns that have been raised here today are met, then I'm more than happy to go back to the applicant and ensure that is done prior to third reading. Again, that was not something that I think the applicant was expecting, but it's something that I'm more than happy to discuss.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, the reason I brought that up, well, it wasn't in the written report, it was in the dialogue that was had during the meeting, where it was stated saying all of these concerns will be dealt with by the third reading. So that was just why I was a little confused. It might have just been spoken out of step with the written report.
Wait, okay, before I don't really want to super nail down Peter anymore for this, so maybe we can have a comments, we can start to have a little debate among council. Oh, I see, Councillor Steer's got his hand up, missed that, sorry. And then,
I was prepared to make comments and I was just waiting for questions to finish, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's let Mr. Thickoff, unless you have a question for clarity. Or an easy one.
So would there, I'm back to the park, but I'm just wondering, so in the development agreement, it would be determined where the park would be, but in the first phase, would there be a park, a usable park, or an unfinished area of park?
Again, thank you for the question, through the mayor. through the chair. The park would be dedicated. So my understanding is this is how it would be perceived. We would say through the development agreement, this is where the park's going to go over time, and then through the fullness of the development. During the first subdivision, we would likely only get a small portion of that area. And then we would also require some sort of access to be provided to that area, as the roads would not be installed to adequately access the area based on the current plans that have been submitted by the applicant. So we would know where the park's going to be, and we would have a portion of that park in place, but it would be largely undeveloped. There wouldn't be swings and slides or a clear soccer field or anything like that at this point in time. It would be kind of the land in the current state that it is. The goal for the district would be moving forward would be to kind of secure that entire area, so we know where it's going to go, and then actually have that land legally transferred as parkland to the District of Tofino, and look for the developer to actually pay for some of the development of that park. Maybe perhaps some of the park may be just left in its natural state, and other areas of it might be turned into I don't know, a new softball diamond or a soccer field or a playground or whatever is deemed appropriate at that point in time, and particularly through discussions with them.
All right, gonna let you off the hot seat.
So here.
But we're gonna let you off because we're gonna go for comments. Councillor Steer, you want me to start off, or you want to go start off?
Oh, go ahead, Mayor Law. Yeah, go ahead, Mayor Law.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to come up with a bang on this one for council. I think the development agreement that Mr. Rogers stressed was a vital key component to moving forward was because of the applicant's unwillingness to address affordability, unwillingness to work with THC, and I was understanding that there would be a servicing report as well as a development agreement. And I'm just going to read some of the quotes about this, and this is exactly what was up on the screen. Development agreement. It was all this would have to be dealt with prior to staff recommending third reading, or definitely final reading. So a little off the hook there, but after that, Mr. Rogers was clear if any of these items were not addressed to the satisfaction of staff will most likely come back with recommendation to defeat the bylaw at third reading. And that went on to servicing has to be addressed prior to moving forward with this bylaw. I'm not seeing a servicing brief still. And staff will be unable to recommend moving forward after the public hearing to third reading if it wasn't addressed. And that goes on and on. So I, to know that there is no development agreement actually in existence, and I haven't seen a servicing report that outlines clearly the forecasted water demand for phase one or the previous phase and the park location. I mean, all of these things are still up in the air. Personally, would be my recommendation to defer third reading until we have these, that would be my go-to, because some of these things have been coming and promised and they just haven't. So that's my hardcore opening, but I'm willing to open it up to council. I have an open mind. Councillor Steer.
Well, thank you, Mayor Law. It's one of those where I hear your concerns. They are legitimate concerns, but I have some concerns around the project being delayed and not moving at an expedient pace. I'm confident after second reading, a public hearing of the community support for this and the recognized need for this particular type of development, which was clearly outlined in our 2015 housing and needs assessment around rental properties. And we heard loud and clear from the community at our public hearing about the necessity for creating this type of supply, the single family lots and the 55 units of rental housing. The concerns that council has brought up over this process, and it has been a long process, I think staff have clearly heard. And as Mr. Thick had pointed out, that the order, and I share the concerns with Mayor Law, but I'm confident in staff's ability to have that development agreement in place before a fourth reading or an adoption would be taken in place. I am very concerned that delays to this type of project, when we know how critical the need is for housing in the community, that we need to put forward. And I would argue on the affordability aspect, which was a concern of council, that having that supply on the market will definitely affect market rates. I suspect when you bring that supply onto the market, we'll hopefully see with the 90 units that we're bringing, that we'll have brought on by 2024, that we should start looking at the pressure downward on those rental. And that's just that's speculation on my part. But once we have that supply that is critically needed and has been identified, for us to delay this when we have strong community support, when we know that we have a development agreement that's going to address some of the major concerns, that I'm confident staff is going to put the work in that will be necessary to placate the concerns of council and to ensure that the pieces of that puzzle are in place so that we can ensure that some of the issues that have been brought up will be mitigated. That's where I'm going to stand on this one. I strongly support moving third reading on this with the anticipation that the work that is to be done will be done and will be done professionally by our staff.
The comments from council.
Are we going to see that?
Yeah, sure. If you want to say something, you don't have to say anything, but now is the time to make your comments of where to move forward. We have the options as noted by Mr. Thick.
I personally was leaning more towards deferring the third reading just because upon reviewing the video of the previous meeting, there was the understanding that there would be a report on the services. There was an understanding that the park dedication was going to be sorted out. There was the understanding that the development agreement was going to be much farther along, if not ready for the third reading. And it just seems like in the last 18 months, maybe some of our bigger issues with this were not addressed yet. I understand there's other spots along the way where we can address them, but it seems like the developers may be unwilling to work on some of these issues, which is a little bit frustrating, but I'm open to hearing everybody's input one way or another.
Councillor Anderson.
I share Councillor Steer's concerns about delaying this, prolonging it for too long. I would be in support of deferring it to receive the service report, which we've heard should have been included on this agenda. I'm not in favor of deferring it until we get the development agreement finalized. I think it's pretty clear that without that being produced and coming before us in a way that addresses all of council's concerns, that fourth reading will not be forthcoming. But in the interest of keeping things moving along and keeping the developer interested in developing or pursuing the development agreement, I think we should, there's a bit of back and forth that needs to happen. It's a significant size development, and it's not something that comes before council often. So there's some reluctance to sort of approach it without every last detail being in place. And that's fair enough. But because of the size of it, because of the cost to a private developer, there has to be a bit of that back and forth. So I think something along the lines of deferring consideration of third reading until we receive the service report would be adequate for me to move ahead. And I think we can have that within probably a council meeting or maybe two, which isn't a great delay to it, given all the time that it's been in the works. And that would, once we receive that and once third reading is agreed off, and I think maybe we'll understand that the process a little better. by then. Hopefully that would keep it moving along and satisfy concerns of council. So,
Thank you.
That was
Councillor
pretty
Swan?
much just what I was going to say.
Sure, I have a question of clarity. Can I ask a question of clarity based on that and then right to you? I hear this often that somehow the delay to this is due to either council or staff. My understanding is that most of the delays with developments are actually, part of the developer's approach. Now, maybe this is a question for Mr. Thick, is that there have been delays in a development agreement. Would you say those delays are like, is that coming from council not dealing with it quickly enough? Is it coming from staff, or is it coming from the developer not entering into conversations that are working to get these things addressed? So maybe that's a question that I need to know. Just, I'm not going to presume that the delays are because we are requesting things, that aren't getting addressed or whatever.
Thank you for the question, Mayor Law. As much as I would like to say that I have no faults, I think that it's clear that it's probably a bit of both. My predecessor, Mr. Aaron Rogers, was the one who spent the majority of the time really working with them. I do know that he spent a significant amount of time helping the developers through our process and helping them kind of move forward. So I would say that this development has been a little bit tricky in that sense, that the developer has, other projects on the go, as well as potentially other approaches that they would like to take to development that are not necessarily in line with District of Tofino practices. So there's certainly been quite a bit of work done by staff. However, it is also true that, for example, I have been off for the summer, and so haven't been able to spend very much time on this particular file. And so there are some delays on the staff side as well. So,
that's great. Thanks for clarifying that. Councillor McMaster.
I think we've heard pretty loudly from the community. They want this to go ahead. My biggest concern when we had the last meeting was the servicing. So I tend to side with Councillor Anderson. If we can see the servicing agreement, then I'm prepared to give it a go ahead, but I'm prepared to defer it till we see that.
Okay. Councillor Steer, I don't see your hand up, just checking.
Yeah, I already stated my comment. I think, I stated it. I don't need to reiterate it. It sounds like council would like to defer for a servicing report, which I'm told is completed, just wasn't given in the package. If I don't know if we can move ahead with the assurance from staff that they will send that servicing report to council separately in an email that didn't get included into this package, and instead of delaying or waiting for 2 council meetings, we could move ahead with third reading and have that servicing report sent to council. I don't know if having that servicing report is going to change councils. If there was anything in that servicing report that really jumped out, I'm sure staff would have brought that up and addressed those concerns with us today. In lieu of that, I still would like to move ahead with third reading at this point, have that servicing report sent to council in an email, and if there are concerns within that servicing report from council, can be brought up at that adoption phase, and that adoption phase could be deferred until further information was gathered. But I would like to move forward with the third reading.
Okay. What's that? Sorry.
Staff can certainly email out the servicing brief. I'm actually a little unclear on whether those are typically included in the packages. And if there are any issues that are identified through that report, they would come before council. Whether that would happen at third reading, that's not necessarily the case, but it would happen prior to adoption if staff had concerns regarding servicing.
I think it was a question clearly of water use for not only phase 1, but future. That was brought up repeatedly. Do we have the water? Where is it coming from? What's the impact? How is the impact going to be, et cetera, et cetera? And, that was one of the things with plus stormwater and all that stuff. So I'm just bringing it up. It was supposed to come to us, I thought, and along with the development agreement. So anyway, maybe we can look to staff. Does it address all of that? Servicing brief.
I don't have that information today. I think I was just providing a level of comfort that we could provide it by email.
Well, I stand by my opinion. I don't think actually requesting the information that was supposed to come is going to cause any delay in this. I think it's going to happen anyway. And if we get it and are happy with whatever information council wants, then we can go quickly to fourth reading. I really don't think that actually delays the process. It just means that we're standing by what we requested and really getting the developer to agree or not agree, so we know. So that's where I stand. I'm going to look to council. We've got two councillors that are interested in service brief. Councillor Steer says we can get that email to us. We can read it on our own. And we've got some concerns from council. So I'm going to look to council. Grant third reading. Defer. I think those are the two until we get some more information. So I'm going to look to council. Does council generally feel that now is the time to grant third reading and get those? Does council want to defer until we get some more concrete answers on the development agreement?
I'm just sensitive. We've just been through a water crisis, and I think I feel morally responsible to see the service agreement.
The water.
Yeah.
I think we've asked for that clearly many times as a council. I think we should get it.
I think it would be remiss of us after what we've gone through this summer not to at least see it.
I would like to defer until we get it, just because I think if we receive it in email and read it, it's very different from receiving it in this sort of environment where we might be able to ask questions and just put it together, where we wouldn't be able to otherwise.
Councillor Anderson.
If we receive the servicing agreement as part of our service review as part of a council package, it becomes part of the public record. It's not just an email sent to us. So I would prefer that we receive it.
Okay, we've got that generally needing. Now, what about this development agreement, council? Do we want to see some movement on this development agreement before we come back to third reading if we do defer, if we choose to defer?
I personally can live without seeing the development agreement right away. I think servicing is the most important factor for me at the moment.
All right.
I mean, if it's there, yeah, I'd like to see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we were promised, and I think personally that I would like to see some movement on it. Councillor or Councillor Big.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Like, could I just ask a question of clarity? That when we're talking about the development agreement, would council prefer to have like a formal covenant drafted by lawyers that outlines all these particular things, or is there some other form that would be acceptable to council, just for the purposes of clarity?
I think actually if we're gonna look at some of these things that we've that have been identified by both council and staff that are going to go into the development agreement, and I would like to know that that it's actually been written down somewhere. Now it's got to go to the lawyer after. I'm sure we can debate it again. Of some of those things. So maybe something in between, where we can say the developer has agreed to do this. Now it's going to the lawyer. Before we get to fourth reading, where you're going to see that in legal. Because right now I'm not sure if there's, where the developer's at with on these things. There doesn't seem to be anything in writing. There's nothing to go to a lawyer with. It seems to me. So that's what I would like to see. That's personally what I would like to see. And I don't, again, I think it's got to happen anyway. So it'd be nice if council had that in writing. In some kind of written form that we can actually, say, yeah, that's now we're happy with that. The developer is understanding that this is the way it's going to be, and now we can go to, to fourth reading comfortably, knowing that the developer is essentially on board and has expressed that somehow.
Thank you.
That would be my preference. I think we beat this one enough. So let's do. I think we've got a way forward. We've got. I think we've got a deferral to defer a third reading until we receive the water and servicing brief, and that it returned to third reading. We'd like to see something in writing on the development agreement, although not at the state of lawyers. Does that make sense? Staff, I'm looking for feedback.
One comment, I believe there is a motion that was kind of drafted. Maybe Mr. Shortall could bring up the presentation again, that basically that the bylaw be deferred until council's concerns outlined in this meeting today are met.
Sure, that's what we're gonna do. I just want to make sure that the council actually is agreed.
I wanted to bring that one up just so there's something to read rather than.
Yeah, I just want to, you understand, I think what we need, so we can, yeah, we can make a motion and then you'll understand where we're at. I just want to make sure council's comfortable with too, because, there's 7 of us here. So I think council is generally comfortable with that. Okay, all right. Then we're gonna do number 1 first, I believe. So from the chair, move to grant permission. Go say. Sorry. Sorry, I got my. Are we here? Okay, so we have 2 recommendations. The first I might as well do from the chair, and that the report attached as appendix 1 containing a summary of representations respecting District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1315/2022 that were made at the public hearing on June 13, 2023 be received by council and maintained as public record. Seconded by Councillor Thomas. Any comment on that? All in favor? None opposed, motion carried. Now, I only have the recommendation to read it a 3rd time, so if you have the option to defer it until council's.
That was on the slide, options for the.
Okay. Sure.
I move that District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1315/2022 attached as appendix 2 be deferred until council's concerns with the bylaw are addressed.
Second.
Councillor McMaster, any further comment?
Just a question, is that motion the right one? Is it too general? That's my question.
Well, I think we've heard from Mr. Thick that he understands our basic 2 requests. Is that sufficient, Mr. Thick?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good.
I just want to appreciate staff taking the time and having the patience with all the questions from those of us that are new to this from the past council having discussed it, and being that it's such a huge development that understanding that it's like half again the size of Tofino, what we could be talking about. So thank you for taking the time to answer all of the questions.
Thanks. Okay, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Note that Councillor Steer is opposed. Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. What time is it? Okay, we got 15 minutes.
I am going to declare a conflict of interest with the next agenda item. 10.6.
Okay.
Due to direct conflict with my employer.
Mayor Law, I just have a statement to make. In previous iterations of this application, I declared a conflict due to aspects of that previous application. Could have had a negative impact on my business interests. Those have been removed from the application at this point, so I'm no longer in conflict, and I'm just stating that for the record.
Thank you. Excellent. All right, I believe we have a PowerPoint from Mr. Latter.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I'm here to get the PowerPoint up. I'm here to introduce, or rather reintroduce, as it were, a zoning amendment application related to 1141 Pacific Rim Highway. The property is currently being used as a long-term staff campground for 32 sites and is currently under a temporary use permit, which expires in April of 2025. Now, as you're probably aware, the application was originally presented to council for permission to proceed on November 22nd, 2022, where it was deferred by council so the applicant could address and remove the tourist accommodation and commercial components that existed at that time. Since then, the applicant has revised the proposal to focus solely on providing staff accommodation and are requesting permission, staff are requesting permission to proceed. Again, now it's noted that this application is contingent on an OCP amendment, which is required to modify some clarifying language to enable the rezoning. And this OCP amendment was introduced to council for permission to proceed at the last council meeting on September 12th. And this OCP amendment, as this is a necessary amendment, a public hearing will be required to satisfy provincial requirements. A little bit about the location, as I'm sure you're all generally familiar with it. It's located south of town along Pacific Rim Highway at Hellison Drive and is approximately 1.75 acres in size. The revised proposal, as shown on the slide there to the left, consists solely of purpose-built rental staff housing and includes 17 modular units consisting of 5 beds each for a total of 85 beds with shared amenity space. The applicant states that units would be available to their own business as well as additional businesses in town as available. The site would retain the existing accesses along Pacific Rim Highway and Hellison Road and provide approximately 20 spaces for parking. When reviewing the proposal against relevant district policy, we find overall there's general alignment, primarily given there's policy support for an increased affordable and rental housing supply in town. In particular, the 2021 Housing Needs Report identifies affordable rental housing as a critical need. In relation to the multimodal transportation plan, although the property isn't within easy walking distance to the downtown, it's within close proximity to alternative and active transportation infrastructure, such as a multi-use pathway and a transit stop located at the commercial area, approximately 250 meters to the south, as well as in proximity to commercial services, things like basic grocery, that sort of thing. In relation to the official community plan, while there's general alignment with broad and area-specific policies, as mentioned previously, an amendment is required for this zoning amendment can be considered. Without going into too much detail, the OCP amendment, which received permission to proceed at the last meeting, is considered very minor in nature, but it is required to clarify broad language that would prohibit staff accommodation outside of the downtown core, despite this use being supported by other policies throughout the plan. Aside from the required amendment, the OCP is largely supportive, primarily due to staff accommodation being a priority use. I'll just mention that additional analysis will be required to mitigate some of the hazard exposure and potential impacts related to servicing and infrastructure. We'll talk about this a little later in the presentation. Staff conducted an additional analysis against general planning principles. From a form and character perspective, staff don't have any initial concerns, but note that there is a development permit required further down the line. That the property is located within the within a development permit area, and this will require a design review panel to review the application at the DP stage. There is also an opportunity for council to provide input on form and character through this rezoning process. From a housing perspective, again, This is the application's sole purpose to provide affordable staff rental housing, and it represents really an important contribution to the district's supply and the primary benefit of this application. From a parking perspective, staff do note that there is a low parking ratio, parking stall to bed ratio, but staff are supportive due to the proximity of alternative transportation infrastructure and the typical low car ownership rates among seasonal staff that will be living at this accommodation. Impacts to servicing and water supply obviously is always a key consideration. Though further analysis will be required by our engineering team to better understand system impacts. Staff housing is a priority use for the district, and residential use. Staff know that residential use is relatively low system draw compared to commercial and industrial uses. From a flood and tsunami risk perspective, the property is located within known inundation areas. Further discussion will be required with the applicant to consider and mitigate risks. It is noted that an existing evacuation plan is in place under the current TUP, which could be used as a starting point for further discussions. Just to reiterate the key considerations and summarize the key aspects of the application, the proposal represents an important contribution to housing within the community, and is worthy of consideration provided additional steps are taken to mitigate the known hazard risks and uncertainty related to servicing. Should this application move forward, a little bit additional community engagement will be necessary because this is such a significant proposal. We do recommend sort of a public information session, which may be appropriate in addition to a public hearing, which will be required regardless. So a little bit on next steps, we would enter into a 21-day referral period for internal and external feedback to be provided, along with further technical investigations. What's not noted there is the recommendation to do additional community engagement. I already noted that existing TUP expires in 2025. So that brings me to the options. The first option, which is staff's recommendation to proceed with further review of the zoning amendment application for 1141 Pacific Rim Highway.
Super, thank you. All right, questions. We'll go down quickly. Questions for clarity for Mr. Leader before we make some comments. Questions for clarity? I have a question about density. This is my understanding that 85 people is 48 people per acre, which seems to me is double the general highest density downtown or anything else. There was issues with density with the TUP, thus they reduced the density. What is the number of people allowed on that property right now?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. I think the question about density is a good one, and it's density. I think in this case it's hard to pin down precisely, given we don't have in light of a lack of prescriptive density requirements for this area. So what I can tell you is sort of summarize the reasons why staff think that moving forward with a density of this level is reasonable to consider it. And firstly, we think about what the use is, and this is a priority use for the community. It's a critical need, so that's one factor. The additional factors include things like, well, we look at form and character, what's surrounding the property. this is a relatively low, from a height perspective, a low development proposal. And while this should not necessarily be a primary consideration, we do see adjacent properties like the Tla-o-qui-aht campground developing with fairly significant density with their campground. In addition to knowing that there are latent development rights related to some of the surrounding resorts that could provide significant density increases in the area. That's one consideration. Additional considerations would be, well, what impacts would this increased density have on things like the environment, on things like servicing, and things like traffic? So I think at this stage, this is permission to proceed. Staff really recommended, and we will anyways go forward with further technical analysis to understand those implications on things like servicing, water supply, and traffic. We will have a traffic impact assessment done. And from an environmental perspective, the site is already largely developed. There is no intent to, further impact existing vegetation. Rather, there is an aspect of the proposal that would, in fact, restore some of the riparian area to the south. So that's generally what we looked at to identify our initial comfort with increasing density in this area. But to give you a specific answer on what the proper or specific density should be in that area, it is fairly difficult to pin down.
Questions from council? Further questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering how this will affect like other properties in the area, like Garden Precedent, being set to have staff come out in that area.
Thank you for the question through the chair. Generally speaking, when we receive applications, they are reviewed under their own merits. I'd like to say that precedent shouldn't be a consideration for future and subsequent applications. While there may be merit in considering similar cases in the past, I generally would say that each application should be considered under its own merits. I wouldn't be necessarily worried about this setting a negative precedent. There are several or many aspects many variables that are considered on a case-by-case basis, which decision makers and staff could use to inform a decision each time. But to answer your question, I wouldn't necessarily be worried about this setting a precedent, given the need to decide each application on a basis. But I'm definitely happy to have additional staff weigh in with their opinion.
Thank you. Further questions, comments from council?
Well, my main objection when this was first presented was the tourist accommodation, and now that's been removed. I'm quite happy to proceed, give permission to proceed.
Councillor Steer.
Thank you through the chair. Yeah, well, I agree with Councillor McMaster. I'm very supportive of this moving forward. My only concerns or comments that I would bring forward, once again, very supportive of moving this forward. It's a critical need that's been assessed. But I have two concerns that staff should listen to. Is it's been clearly identified in the report around the tsunami risk, and that this is in fact in a tsunami risk area. Once again, putting that kind of density in that type of area can be problematic. from a moral standpoint as well as a technical standpoint. So it is a concern, and I know that within the report that from that permission to proceed report, that some of the mitigation measures that could be discussed, and not only discussed but should be absolutely implemented for this to be able to move forward, is a solid evacuation plan, as well as many other potential education proposals that would help mitigate some of the risks involved with building in this tsunami risk area. So that's the main one. And of course, once again, has been reiterated in our last conversation around water servicing. Those people, and it's relative to the other application that we had talked about in terms of the numbers of people. The people already exist. They're already here. They are already using the water, whether it's on this development or not. But certainly we want to be very cognizant of the draw in those water services that are coming forward. So absolutely that component of the operation of the proposal, should be coming forward very clearly. I'll leave it at that, but I'm very supportive of moving forward with a permission to proceed.
Okay, let's go around. Let's go right around. How about?
Okay, yeah. I have no questions. Maybe we could.
Maybe I'll let you off the hook there.
Thank you.
Sorry, get you on the hot seat.
Okay. Yeah, I'm supportive of moving ahead. I'm interested to see how the traffic assessment deals with the two accesses. I'm not really sure if the access directly onto Pacific Rim Highway is the best, but I'll wait for a traffic assessment to determine that. I think the density issues are manageable, and the questions that council has around that will largely be dealt with in the OCP amendment and the public feedback that we get on that. So there'll be more to hear and to know about that as we go through that part of this process. But yeah, I think Councillor Steer said it pretty well. The people are already here and having a better living situation, a more stable living situation for so many people is a primary concern.
Councillor Sloman.
For me, I feel like I want to get those people out of the trailers and into more permanent living situation. I do feel fairly uncomfortable with having high density in that inundation zone, but I feel comfortable having more public review. That'll be covered for me.
I'm okay. I'm fine with permission to proceed for this. I have a problem with density. I think it's come up every single time in the TUP process, as well as the previous permission to proceed. It was a little, not a surprise, but I am not okay with 85 people in that. That's 48 people per acre, which is double the density of any other, almost double the density, including high rises in town. So I think there's going to be significant problems besides for a tsunami. I think there's other problems with putting that many people in one small space. Not in town. So I'm okay to go for it, but I certainly have an opposition to 85 units. And personally, I would like to see it more in line with what already exists. I think we could justify housing the people that are there within reason. And but that's my comment. Did you hear? Councilor, do you want to say anything?
I don't have anything to add that hasn't already been said. So
all right. All right then. I think
I'll move that staff be granted permission to proceed with further review of the rezoning applications to 1141 Pacific Rim Highway, and that the public hearing be held in association with the application.
super. Any further comments from council? Was that a comment, Councillor Steer? Or no, you're just.
No, I was just seconding.
Oh, seconding. Okay, that's fine. Seeing no comments, all in favor? None opposed. Motion is carried. Now, I think we've got a break right now for supper, and we're going to maybe make it. Let's make it 22 minutes, and we want to reconvene. Is that enough time?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll do that. We'll reconvene at 7 o'clock. 10.7, we have zoning amendment for Q&amp. That's great.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council again. This presentation may almost sound like a carbon copy of the previous one we just had, given there are very many similarities between the two applications. So my apologies in advance if it sounds a little repetitive, but I will move forward. So this is a introduction of a permission to proceed for a zoning amendment at 1211 Pacific Rim Highway. The application was received on January 3rd of this year. And similar to the previous application, this one is also contingent on an OCP amendment to enable staff accommodation in the ocean interface designation. This OCP amendment was introduced at the last council meeting on September 12th, which received permission to proceed. And as an OCP amendment is necessary to facilitate this zoning amendment, a public hearing will be required to satisfy provincial requirements. Now, the subject property is shown outlined in red on the screen. It's located south of town, just north of Lynn Road, and is adjacent to the Q&amp Inn property. The area to be rezoned is shaded in orange and is approximately 1.5 hectares and takes up a relatively small portion of the whole property. The applicant is proposing the development of a purpose-built rental staff housing complex that would serve the Q&amp Inn staff. It would consist of two-story buildings containing 31 beds with shared facilities and amenities, and would include approximately 20 parking stalls. Access would be provided from the north through an extension of a driveway on the adjacent property, which is also owned by the applicant. The slide is showing the proposed site plan. A reduced amount of on-site parking, approximately 20 stalls, are proposed alongside sheltered and secured bicycle parking. It's noted that an environmental assessment was already conducted, which identified the existence of a bog and stream to the eastern portion of the property. The siting of the building has taken this into account already and provides approximately 15-meter buffer from the edge of the bog in accordance with provincial requirements. Now, the proposal was reviewed against relevant district policies, including the Vision Action Plan, Housing Needs Assessment, Multimodal Transportation Plan, Land Use Demand Study, along with the OCP. And in general, the proposal is in alignment with these policy documents, which by and large support additional affordable housing in town. While the property is not within walking distance to the downtown area, it is within close proximity to active and alternate transportation infrastructure, such as multi-use pathway and a transit stop at the outside Bright commercial area, about 250 meters. When it comes to the official community plan, while there is general alignment with broad and area-specific policies, as mentioned before, an OCP amendment is required before this zoning amendment can be considered. And as I stated in the previous presentation, this amendment is considered minor in nature and is intended to clarify broad language that otherwise prevents development outside of the downtown area from being considered, despite other policies within the OCP supporting certain development types outside the downtown area, such as staff accommodation. Outside of this amendment, the OCP is largely supportive, given that staff housing is a priority use, though it's noted that additional analysis will be required to consider and mitigate risks to hazard exposure and impacts to servicing such as water supply. Staff also conducted initial planning and site analysis against core planning principles, such as form and character. The property is within the tourism focused development permit area, which guides form and character and environmental considerations. While staff have no concerns over the compact form and design at this stage, the design review panel will be referred to during the development permit process. And also, I will note that council does have the opportunity to provide comment on form and character through the rezoning process. The primary benefit of this application is the increase in affordable staff rental housing. To ensure the units are used for their intended purpose, a housing agreement is being recommended by staff. From an environmental impact perspective, as noted, though there is vegetative clearing that's required, the impacts to the environment will be mitigated through site design and siting. And I note that the siting of the housing complex is already taking into consideration the existence of the bog with the 15-meter buffer. From a traffic impact perspective, a traffic impact analysis will be required prior to first reading. I do note again that a low parking ratio is proposed. Though staff are supportive of this approach due to the relative proximity of alternative transportation infrastructure such as the multi-use pathway and a transit stop, as well as the provision of sheltered and secured bike parking on site. In addition to the typical low car ownership rates among seasonal staff that would be housed at this development. Again, impacts to servicing and water supply, always a key consideration, though further analysis will be done by the engineering department, Public Works, to better understand system impacts. Again, the property is located within known flood, inundation, and tsunami areas. The further discussion with the applicant will be needed to consider and mitigate these risks, including the development of an evacuation plan and other specific measures. I should note that the area is within the flood construction level 1 of the flood construction bylaw, which requires the construction of floor levels to be above the I believe it's 5.1 meter level above flood inundation heights. This slide again just summarizes the key considerations. On balance, this does represent an important increase to the needed critical affordable rental supply in town. That said, additional analysis is required to better understand impacts from a servicing perspective, a traffic impact perspective, and additional considerations and conversations to mitigate known hazard risks. Again, similar to the last one, as this is a fairly significant rezoning, adding additional density to the area, additional opportunities for public engagement are recommended, in addition to the required public hearing process. Next steps, if permission to proceed is granted, we will move forward with a 21-day referral process for internal and external feedback from stakeholders, along with further investigations from a technical nature, which would then inform drafting a bylaw prior to first reading. And again, what this slide does not show is the recommendation to also do additional public engagement. With that, the recommendation from staff is that staff proceed with further review of the zoning amendment application for 1211 Pacific Rim Highway.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. All right, opening up to council for questions for clarity. Questions, any questions? No. Councillor Anderson and Councillor McMaster.
Councillor McMaster.
Did you get any reasoning from the applicant as to why he just didn't put this on development on his C5 property, where he wouldn't have to apply for an OCP change?
I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of the applicant in this case. I can only sort of make guesses, but I don't know. Yep.
Councillor Anderson.
My question is, the OCP amendment that we need to examine or whatever that needs to be considered as part of this it's for affects the same area and would be the same amendment we're considering for the area that includes the previous application. It's one OCP amendment that covers a larger area.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Correct. Through the chair, the OCP amendments that is currently being investigated further would enable staff and council to more comfortably consider applications for staff accommodation within the ocean interface designation, which contains both of these individual properties.
Just curious, I don't have a map in my head of what that area is that we would be considering that in.
It largely stretches sort of around the North Chesterman area, and I believe further south to the Cox Bay area and potentially Mackenzie Bay. I think largely around the beach areas.
Okay.
We could.
I'll look into it, but I just need to
see if
I'm correct.
Yep.
Okay. I just have a technical question for council, though. Part of this, Jim. I just want to know, if we've got an OCP, we've got a tsunami and flood risk hazard assessment of the area, mapping, etc. If we allow high density, now this is just a question, maybe about the previous two and OCP amendment in general, but or previous application in this one as well. If we allow density in an area that we know is a high risk for tsunami and flood, and there is a tsunami and flood, are we adopting a risk besides, putting a lot of people potentially in harm's way? Is there a risk to the district? How does it work with districts like?
To be frank, I think that might be a better question to the council. I think it would be. I mean, to be frank, I think it'd be. I think there always is an element of risk that you're sort of adopting. I think, provided you can demonstrate that you're providing due diligence to carefully consider the risks and develop certain mitigation measures, whether it be evacuation plans, what have you, could demonstrate taking on due diligence required to sort of mitigate that risk. But to be frank, I'm not entirely sure what level of risk from a legal perspective would be imposed upon the district.
Sure. One comment. Great. Yeah, that's a question that I have into MIABC at the moment. So it's something that we're already kind of looking into. We don't have any conclusive answer, as Mr. Lader's alluded to, but it's something that we'll need to get a pretty solid answer on before we actually consider first reading the bylaw. So it's something that will hopefully happen between now and when we bring it back.
Super. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for that. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Steer.
No, Mayor Law, I'm just waiting for the comment period.
Okay, I think I'm gonna let you off the hot seat, and then we can go around if people have comments. We can make them brief. Councillor Steer, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor Law, through the chair. Yeah, just a couple of comments. I am supportive of the permission to proceed at this point in time for the rezoning application. I think the concerns, once again, similar to the last ones, where we're putting some form of density in a known risk area that was just alluded to by yourself, Mayor Law. So that is once again a concern. My other major concern is, and I don't think it was given as much attention to in this report as I think it was necessary, is some of the environmental impacts, that the potential environmental impacts of this proposal. That bog is an incredibly important piece of ecosystem within our area. It supports one of the major fish-bearing streams that we actually have on the district, Mackenzie Creek, which flows through and is utilized by that particular bog. So some of the, if you looked at the professional report from Current Environmental Limited, there are some significant suggestions and recommendations that are within that report. And before any sort of activity was there, I wanted to ensure that the hydrological patterns, biophysical conditions, that the local topography retain that water under those areas are maintained. And in that report, there is some questions around, and I'll quote just so that I'm not. In the SPEA areas, those are the stream protection and enhancement areas. There's already been some encroachment into the SPAAs on the wetland number 3, and if you look at the map, you'll see where it is. It's already occurred to the north of that wetland for the construction and current driveway and hydrological work. So I'm concerned that some of the mitigation measures that it says should be, those absolutely have to be done, not should, have to be done before this can be moving forward. Once again, I cannot reiterate how important this particular area is. An incredibly sensitive ecosystem that is relatively rare along the peninsula and something that should be taken into consideration moving forward with this application. But I am supportive of the permission to proceed. Absolutely. It's addressing a critical need.
Super. Thank you, Councillor Steer. Any comments from council? I fully read the report, the environmental assessment report, and I agree very much with Councillor Steer. And it was a concern for me that I wasn't sure how the district would ensure that those environmental recommendations would actually be followed. And that was a question I was actually going to have for planning. Is there a mechanism that the district can ensure those are followed, or is that just up to the developer once they get going?
Thank you, Mayor Law. The question, the typical mechanism is through the development permit process. So this happens usually after a rezoning application. Then we'll prepare a development permit that takes all the recommendations in the report and actually makes them required actions of the developer. The other opportunity or way that we can do that would be through some sort of a covenant or development agreement towards the end of this rezoning process. However, because we have a fairly robust development permits requirement over this particular piece of property, it would be a little bit redundant.
Okay, super. Excellent. Any further comments? I have one actually interesting comment. I know we're a short time, it'll be quick. It was very interesting for me to read the environmental report, and one of the bits of data that was cited in there was a report on the annual precipitation decrease, projected annual precipitation decrease for Tofino was 3%. And I just wanted to make a note that this year our summer precipitation decrease was over 75%. I think that's something that I don't want to lose sight of in all of this. Anyway, that's my comment. Councillor Steer.
Yeah, just one further to reiterate that point. So within the blue listed areas, and this particular ecosystem is a special concern ecosystem with known characteristics that make it particularly sensitive or vulnerable to human activities or natural events. So just once again, reiterate it within the report how important these areas are and how potentially impactful they are to human activity.
Thank you, Councillor Steer. Okay, if there's no further comments, then we can go to the motion.
I'll move that staff be granted permission to proceed with further review of the rezoning application for 1211 Pacific Rim Highway, and a public hearing be held in association with the application.
Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay, we have business initiated by council members. This is a committee and external appointment, verbal reports from council members. I know we have Councillor Steer with an ACRD West Coast Committee report.
Mayor Law, yeah, just grab that here. Yeah, there's a few significant things. We had the West Coast Committee meeting last week. And that consists of Area C, the municipality of Q&amp, and two of the treaty nations that are part of that, with ex officio members, the Tla-o-qui-aht and Parks Canada represented as well on that West Coast Committee. So some of the updates there, the pilot parking fee system project that was out at the airport. Recommendation from the committee is for that to become permanent. There was some slight revenues associated with it, but some of the more really interesting things, so there was better parking management and way better parking security out at the site. So it was decided with a little bit of revenue to make it a worthwhile project moving forward. So the recommendation from the committee was to have that a permanent project. Then there was an amendment to the tipping fee and service. This came out of a service fee review that was requested. And there's a recommendation to adopt those. What it does is basically reflects the real reality of what it costs to do things out at our landfill in Tofino, and to be consistent with regional districts across the island, frankly. So we want to come into alignment with those and to make sure that we are recovering costs associated with the operating. If you guys look at your ACRD component of your property tax bill, you will see it represents about 10%. So we want to ensure that that we're not subsidizing some of those activities. The big one was the West Coast Transit, a recommendation from the West Coast Committee. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on this one. The recommendation to the board was to approve the highest level of scheduled service for the West Coast Transit service, which we've already agreed to the service provider. We hadn't agreed to the service level. I will admit there was some discussion with the board around that recommendation. The recommendation was for a mid-level service. Through the board discussion, it came to the highest level. There were some concerns with some of the board members, committee members, that what happens in these areas, the way that service is appropriated or portioned throughout, is based on a proportion that is based on 50% on basis of population and 50% on the basis of land and improvements. So what that means is Tofino ends up paying for the exact same service as the District of Q&amp will receive. We pay 60% more for that particular service. And so the higher the service level, the higher the cost. So there was some discussion about equity and how we can look at ways of making a more equitable situation. So that discussion, at the end of that discussion, by majority, the board had agreed to the highest service level. But within there was discussion with staff at the ACRD that there was direction for them to be looking at some mitigating factors to offset that service costs, to help lower the overall cost of that service. And hopefully proportionately would lower the costs to the taxpayers of the region. So that's the update on there. There was a great report on the organics diversion from the commercial sources. That's hopefully, well, it should be in place by December. And that is going to encompass a lot of the commercial operators in that organics diversion. There's a whole bunch of a list of planned milestones and dates within that report, and a really interesting one. There's hopefully there will be establishing a ban on organics in our landfill by the end of 2024. So with all the diversion projects that we have going on, this is a step in the right direction. We can go into landfill costs and stuff for a long time. I won't bore you with that. You can read the reports, and that is about it.
Super. Thank you. Any other reports from council? Oh yeah, Councillor Sloan.
So at the end of September, I met with Tourism Tofino, and the resort occupancies were, I think, obviously down for the summer of 29, or down to below 2019 levels. And one thing I felt was interesting was visitation to the Pacific Rim Park was down below 2014 levels. And then some of the resorts have switched to using well water, and they plan to do this for next summer.
Excellent. Any other, Councillor Baxter?
Just say that after the Housing Corporation meeting the other week, I went with the director, Kelly Lynn, and another director. We had a tour of Headwaters, DO104, and now the walls are, interior walls are up. You get a totally different impression. It's looking really good.
Excellent. Super.
Moving date is predicted to be March now because the delay because of the Cameron Blocks fire.
Now that, just for clarity, the move-in date for the second building was March, but the first building's still January. Is that right? Or-
I think it's first building is March, and then the
is
second
it?
one's going to be.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Great. Well, yes.
I've got updates from the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board.
Super.
That we have adopted a new 2024 budget. And there were changes to the reserves and the structure of the new reserve contributions. And reporting framework will better align with local government practices. And it is a vast improvement, and there will be information forthcoming to financial departments. And in some really exciting news too, the new Massett Library has been approved for construction, and it is also a Haida language immersion lab. So it's a really exciting move for that community.
Lots of great stuff happening on committees. Good jobs. Excellent. Any further? Nothing. Okay. Moving on to 12.2, we have notice of motion from Councillor Sloman regarding providing incentives for the use of grey water and rain. We have a verbal report from Councillor Sloman.
Did you guys read my report?
Of course we did.
Okay, so the purpose of my motion is to incentivize the use of rain and recycled water within the District of Tofino. We have seen for years and will continue to see how climate change will affect available water. And we have increased pressure to provide more housing, which will further increase demand on water. These harvesting and recycling systems can greatly reduce demand on potable water. With increased temperatures, the need for shade and cool green spaces will increase. New and existing landscapes may not be able to flourish with continued and extended water restrictions. Without these green spaces, there will be increased pressure on food security, mental health, and our wildlife. These systems can provide water without adding pressure to our potable water supply.
Super. I also note it's a high priority for from the water report to see clearly. Super. Any comments, questions from council? Seeing none.
I'll just say I'm always careful about incentives because it's a question of who you're giving the incentives to, not necessarily the people that need the money to do something. And secondly, if you look at city of Guelph, which population of say approximately 1,500, they were one of the first municipalities in Canada to introduce incentives for grey water in 2009, and by 2019 they had 34 applicants.
Interesting.
But it's just, I mean, I think we can start looking at new builds should have grey water systems, but it costs a lot of money to put in a grey water system and it takes time to pay it off. And if we're gonna, an incentive is generally most municipalities are offering $1,000 to $2,000. I don't think that's a big enough incentive for people to do it. So I think a lot of thought have to go into it. And I wonder how much staff time this will take. That's a question to staff.
Through the chair to Councillor McMaster, I think it would be difficult for me to assess the amount of time until we start looking into it. But what I can say is we do have a water conservation roundtable that will be convening the end of October, and this is something we could certainly insert into that discussion and report back out to council on the roundtable outcomes and perhaps incentives around rainwater and grey water. It may be that we come back with a more, with a recommendation on sticking with rainwater, for example, because those can be sometimes a lower cost option and maybe more able to provide incentive. So it will take some time to look into, but I'm not sure exactly how much.
Super. I understand we've had, you know, offsite discussions on water rate review, and that there's a possibility of some of the highest users paying for, I mean, it's an idea that's been thrown out there, but I'm sure it will come up in the roundtable and elsewhere. The highest users may pay more, and that money can perhaps used for those who need to put in grey water, upping the incentive to something that's reasonable. And awesome. So anyway, it's great. This is a good motion. I think it will spur some great discussion, and hopefully something comes out of it. Anybody like to? Oh, sorry, Councillor Steer.
That's okay. I know it's that's a problem with the Zoom world. I just wanted to make a comment that I support the motion wholeheartedly. At the same time, I think Councillor McMaster brought up the two concerns that I do have, and that was around incentives. And once again, not to be speculative, our CAO commented on the amount of staff time. And I just want to point out that it is a concern. It seems to be a concern of council, as the motion that was defeated around the liquor control issue, where there was concerns about the amount of staff time. This will take a considerable amount of staff time to bring forward. I just wanted to leave it there.
Super. Okay. Any further comments from council? Questions? Seeing none? Okay, I'll move from the chair that staff be directed to review the proposal and report back to council with recommendations and incentives for the use of grey water and rainwater in existing and proposed buildings and properties within the District of Tofino. By Councillor Sloman, great. Any further comments from council? All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. All right, I have another motion, flag. I did receive this flag as a gift from 1970s Superintendent Davies. And it is the survivor flag. And it is a national flag, nationally designed by survivors of residential school. It has a significant meaning. And there is one hanging at the elementary school, and there will be one hanging if there's already at the USS. I'm sure it's already there actually, but so my motion is going to be recommendation that we hang this in the village green next to the event. So questions? Seeing none. I'll move from the chair. The District of Tofino raised the survivors flag in the village green, commemorating the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Seconded by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments from council? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Now we have UBCM verbal reports from council members who attended. Would like to start. We had a few council members attend. It can be very brief and just your highlights. Absolutely, Councillor.
Well, what I took from that was I reached my maximum socializing at about 4 o'clock. I felt like there was a lot of problems brought forward by municipalities within our province regarding housing, safe injection sites, safe drug supply. But what I took, the bottom line from that was, when it all comes down to what's going to be the critical thing is our response to climate disasters and how we can respond. I take from that.
Great. All right, Councillor Sawyer.
I enjoyed meeting very much with some of the other small communities from the interior of the island and coastal areas. I attended some forums and discussions on forest management as well as climate resiliency, and saw a really interesting connection in communities where the discussion is turning the way you saw to what climate resiliency looks like and how managing our urban greenscapes is a big part of that. So I think it was the Village of Ashcroft led that discussion on moving to preserve urban forest canopy to provide cooling areas to members of the community who live in homes that will regularly be over 30 degrees during both the day and night. And while we might not reach those temperatures, it's something that I'd like to focus on here as well for those same reasons.
Super. Great.
You want to go?
No.
Okay. I thought it was very interesting to see the snapshot of what a diverse amount of issues we deal with across the province. There's definitely some places, maybe close to Alberta, that have very different priorities than us, but there was a lot of things that unified everybody around obviously safe and responsible substance use, housing, and climate seem to be underlying for everyone. It was super eye-opening to just see the process. Maybe we didn't have anything we were necessarily advancing publicly this time around, but it's cool to see what the avenues would be for that. I always appreciate any chance we get to use our voice for bigger issues. I think things like that are pretty important. And I thought it was of value to have a good representation, because some of the issues and resolutions that we were showing the province we wanted to prioritize were pretty close calls. And so sometimes you see a good snapshot of where every vote matters. And I think it's a good opportunity to be a part of the bigger picture.
Councillor Steer.
Yeah, the once again, the connections that we can make with staff of the various ministries and those side conversations that happen to advance some of the things that we find important in our region. Once again, I noted over many UBCMs now, once again, the rural urban divide that seems to wedge many of the provincial issues that come forward. And I think I can speak to the ongoing need for resolution reform at UBCM so that we start prioritizing some of those resolutions that the province can take seriously, instead of having whatever the number is, to start whittling that down to the prioritized issues that we really want the province to look at.
Super. Yeah, I actually always enjoy meeting people face to face and seeing where other communities are at, some similar and some very different. Meeting the ministers and their staff to realize that we're all people, that are living and trying and working hard. I must say, we've had in the past, we've had a lot of meetings. We had few meetings this time, and I think going forward, one of the things that struck me is how important those meetings are. And so I look forward to next year, sort of really thinking where it's important to meet those ministers and keep some initiative going. So that was something that I learned, and I'm already thinking about next year and what we can do to make sure that some of our highest needs, ongoing needs, are met, and how we can act to make sure they happen. And Tatiana, do you want to say anything? You were there. You were a major part of Tofino at UBCM. No, you're. Well, it's lovely to have you there. It's great. That was it. Now we have a standing committee for CAO performance review. There's an existing policy that's a little bit out of date. So part of this standing committee, mayor's standing committee, is to review that existing policy to make it more in line, more usable, more appropriate for what we have. So I'm looking for myself and two councillors. I've already had one councillor, Councillor Sawyer, put her hand up. So I'm looking for another councillor. Councillor Steer.
Yeah, I would be available to sit on the standing committee, being part of the hiring committee that initially hired our CAO. Some of the criteria that we looked at in that hiring component might be useful in the evaluation of the performance.
Okay, well, I have two hands putting themselves forward. Look at the council. Is everybody okay with that? Anybody want to have an arm wrestle or whatever it is? No. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm glad there's two from the hiring committee and one new counselor. So I'll move from the chair that the standing committee established for the purposes of reviewing current related policy and the performance of the chief administrative officer, and that the mayor and Councillor Sawyer and Councillor Steer be appointed to the committee. Seconded by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments from council? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carried, none opposed. Mr. Shortall, do we have anybody signed up for submissions?
Currently, there's nobody signed up for question period. I will do one last call to the public. If anyone's attending via Zoom that would like to ask a question of council, they can do so now by stating their name, their address, and the agenda item that their questioning relates to. Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times, and no questions.
All right, super. Thank you much. And what we'll do is we'll move into the closed session. Would somebody like to move to the closed session with a recommendation?
I'll move that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 90 of the community charter to discuss matters relating to 1, the personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. 1C, labor relations or other employee relations. 1L or I. 1L, discussions with municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purpose of preparing an annual report under section 98, annual municipal report. 1F, law enforcement, if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment. 2B, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality, provincial government, or the federal government, or both, or between the provincial government or the federal government, or both, and a third party.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Master. Any comments? Besides, I like things in alphabetical order. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carried.
Can I ask for